Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I am here with...
I'm Jack Caeser, and I am one of Caeser Inc., the designers of Doomsong.
So I'm really excited to talk to you about Doomsong, your project. And if viewers are wondering why specifically, it's because Jack is one of the brains behind this gem. Anything with Labyrinth with the name on it, I will buy it anyway, because it's such a great movie, great story, great cast. The amount of puzzles and interesting things. It's a movie filled with original, creative ideas. And just like this adventure game you have here is also very original. It's not your typical D&D clone or anything like that. It's a lot of original ideas of how to play this as well, which I like. But that's a different video. Today we're going to talk about Doomsong. So I'm curious to hear about what this is about. So let's start at the beginning. What exactly is Doomsong?
Well, honestly, the Labyrinth role-playing game isn't a terrible place to start, as that's sort of where we sort of cut our teeth on the kind of way we wanted to present RPGs. So something that we've always been super passionate about is usability in RPGs and actually being able to run the thing from the book and making that process as simple as possible. So something that we used in Labyrinth is that every scene is on a 2-page spread. Everything's always presented in if you're running this part of the adventure, you've got it open in this part of the book. So when we're designing Doomsong, the adventure is written in a very similar way in terms of getting that usability. Everything's on 2-page spreads at a time that you're using, which is a really good way of avoiding the bloat of, I want to write about this thing for 10 pages. Well, you can't because it has to fit on 2. But that's the sort of more nitty-gritty mechanical side of the impetus. The more interesting and narrative side, which is probably more what is the elevator pitch, is that Doomsong is a roleplay macabre set in a world undergoing a biblical apocalypse. So God is dead, everything's going poorly, and the horsemen are escaping from hell. And in our first book, that is the pestilence, Father Plague, Lord of the Plaguescape, and he has ripped a part of the world from reality and has turned it into his own personal playden. And it's all terrible. That's Lord have mercy upon us. That's our first sort of adventure book, and we are currently gearing up for our second adventure book, which will be hitting Kickstarter later this year. We're aiming for June, but that might move back or forth depending. And that is called Thou Shalt Not Suffer the Witch, and is all focused around the second horseman of the apocalypse, Famine, who there's a cabal of witches throughout the world which are causing these famines. And it's your job as witchfinders to go out and find them and save the day. You're definitely the good guys. Definitely not an apparatus of a corrupt system that is putting a huge amount of stress on everybody and burning innocence.
So first thing I have to ask is, where did the idea for this story, this setting, come from?
So it came from the mind of Morgan Finley, who is my sister-in-law and has a PhD in Greek mythology and English literature. I might have got those two mixed around. But she is a very involved person in mythology and the creation of imaginary sort of worlds and deities and these sort of systems. And it started as it was pre-COVID, as a project that essentially was a creative outlet for her job at the time was not hugely creative. So it sort of started as that. And we always joke that it's the Plaguescape and it's pestilence. But she did start writing it about half a year before COVID. So if she did cause that, we're sorry. And then sort of throughout COVID, she expanded on the world and sort of built it up as this one adventure. Then brought on Chris and I as sort of RPG people, designers. Chris is my brother. and he is the sort of layout and graphics guy, the pioneer of sort of the 2-page system and the argument that half of a role-playing book is layout as much as anything else. And so he brought that expertise. I brought the dice and numbers and how to roll things to make things happen expertise. And then together we sort of created Doomsong, sort of combining what sort of was in Morgan's head and turning it into something that could be played at a table with as minimal prep time as possible.
Interesting. So the setting. So it sounds like it takes place in a modern or maybe a bit closer to the future type of setting. And you mentioned that we're playing like witch hunters.
So quite the opposite. It is like Dark Ages medieval world that essentially is going through the big biblical apocalypse when they sort of thought that was going to happen. There was quite this common theme in the Dark Ages, and before comments, Dark Ages is definitely not the right term. There's a lot of different ways to talk about sort of the medieval era and what counts as medieval. Luckily, this is a fantasy world, and these are definitely the Dark Ages of that fantasy world. They're the darkest of the ages, and it's kind of born from that fear, because in that era there was a lot of, well, we've had the Roman Empire and things were they were terrible for a lot of people, and they were but you can see all these vestiges of things that quote unquote civilization was able to do, and there's a lot of this espousing of oh, this is it then, this is what they're all talking about, this is the end times. And hopefully it wasn't, but there was a lot of thought around that era of, well, maybe we are living in the worst timeline, something that might resonate with a few people nowadays. But so yeah, it's this ancient world that has a lot of hang-ups. We've created a lot of our own sort of religious doctrine. As I said, in the beginning, there was the immortal. They created everything and then were immediately murdered by their own children. So what that creates is you've got this church, which is very much inspired by organized religion, by the Catholic Church, by other sort of institutions that is sort of holding on to this this true religion, the one that created the universe, but they're dead and they don't give powers and they don't have magic, whereas the traitor gods, as they're called, are heretical. They're evil and should be punished and sort of thrown out of society. But on the other hand, they are actually able to cure the sick and provide for the poor and do all of these things that are very beneficial for a society. And so you have that sort of juxtaposition of magic and usefulness that is fun to play around with.
Interesting. Before we talk about what type of characters you can be in this setting, I have to ask: was it a lot of fun creating your own cosmology, your own, in a sense, theology of this world?
It was a lot of fun, actually. That was so. It was actually a huge part of the sort of early sessions of world building, sort of going very theocratically, sort of from top to bottom, because we have a lot of want to explore that kind of religious space in a way that is, I think, often not fully explored for good reason. It's quite a hot topic in a lot of circles, and to take the D&D example, that is a world in which you don't have to worry about faith because the gods definitely exist and they're definitely what they say they are, and everything is fairly on the level. And then in sort of more modern or more real world adjacent games, you have this, well, you sort of treat it in the same way as you do in the real world. Whereas we're sort of sitting in this middle space where the gods exist, they definitely exist, but they're probably lying to you at every point in time. And the one that's sort of the most powerful definitely isn't real or isn't alive anymore. So you have this sort of mix of ways of thinking about things that causes a lot of tension, and we play around with that sort of that vibe a lot, especially in thou shalt not suffer the witch, which in our world, sort of witches are patrons of the, or rather, they seek the patrons of the traitor gods, so are very tied in with that Satanism and paganism and things that the church had a lot of opinions about.
Character creation. So who can you be exactly in this setting?
So in the game, the first thing you do when you sort of start a campaign is create a guild. In the sort of core, in the first campaign, Lord Have Mercy Upon Us, you are playing as gravediggers, who are trying to deal with the fact that the dead are unquiet, they're coming back. It's all like their original job is just to bury the dead, but now they have to like put down the dead and then bury them, which is putting a lot of stress on their resources and their manpower. And then in the second book, you are playing as part of the Witchfinders Guild. But sort of you're always playing as a guild, which is a institution that has the right to basically grab any criminals, any heretics, and those mad enough to actually want to join of their own free will, to basically do something for society. And because it's a horror game, it's filled with a lot of like high lethality moments, and you can die very quickly by making the wrong decision or just having luck be against you. We've made our character creation system super quick, and it gives you a little backstory. It's kind of like a little choose your own adventure. In fact, would you be interested in making a character real quick?
So yes, let's begin. Let's talk about how easy it is to make characters in Doomsong. I see here you have an origin section right here. Welcome, stranger. The guild takes anyone seeking sanctuary within its walls. We have highborn and low, the scum of the earth, and those who would turn their backs on the dull existence of daily life. Whatever has brought you here will not surprise us. Well, let's have it. Where did your story begin? So
the Doomsong character creation system is super unique. It is essentially a sort of choose your own adventure where you start here as a baby. You've just been born. Then you roll to find out where you were born, and that will sort of open up opportunities, like nicer opportunities if you're born into wealth and privilege, and worse opportunities if you're born into the wilderness or the slums. And then essentially that'll give you sort of a job or a way of life when you were young. That'll lead on to sort of a way of life when you are older. And at any point sort of during this adventure, you might join the guild. Everyone's character creation ends with them joining the guild. In our original campaign, that is the Gravediggers Guild. And in our upcoming Kickstarter, that is the Witchfinders Guild. So it sort of changes up sort of the end of character creation and what you sort of get either as your place in life or just generally equipment-wise. Essentially, the guilds in the setting are institutions that have been given the right by the Ecclesiarchy to recruit heretics and criminals, as well as like ordinarily hire people in the ordinary way. But that means that a lot of your sort of stories will end with, and you were caught for doing a crime, and your choices were, a gallows or the guild. And often you can choose the gallows. However, I do not suggest it unless you really hate the character you've rolled. But yeah, this character creation app is basically a digitized version of the one in the main book. So there's sort of no new content in it. It is entirely just automated and streamlined sort of version of the thing in the core book that is open to everyone. So if you haven't sort of got the core book because your GM's got the core book, but you want to make up a character between sessions, you can use this, and hopefully it will work. There are a couple. Well, it'll definitely work, but there's a couple of things that we are still changing. So hopefully we'll miss those, but hopefully it'll work.
okay, so for the most part, this follows the same steps you would take normally that the book presents in making the character. Okay, excellent. So I see that there's a dice on the bottom left, and then on the right we see choose a name, save the PDF, and some other information. Where do we start first?
So if you click on the dice icon below, where did your story begin? On phone, this is all essentially that main sort of block is what you'll see. On desktop, you have sort of the ancillary information on the right that'll tell you a little bit more about your character as you go through. But for now, if you click on that die, it will tell you where you were born.
All right, I click it. Looks like I roll a 2, and I am Gutter Snipe. You were just another drop in the affluent flow that is the slums of Asartum. Hopefully, I didn't mispronounce that. Only the quick. Oh, sorry.
Perfect pronunciation.
Only the quick, the clever, and the brutal survive there, and even they need luck. Choose your birth name and record it in your character sheet. Gain the Slumcast.
Slumcast. So yeah, in Asartum, which is sort of the capital city of humanity, in the sort of last bastion against the encroaching forests that are choking the world. There is, much like in our society, the haves and the have-nots. The slumcast are those sort of the have-nots, born to poverty, living sort of hand to mouth and on the streets and trying to survive. One of the unique things about Doomsong is that you have a birth name, and then at the end of character creation, you can come up with any nicknames, essentially. There are some mechanics in the game that care about your birth name. So, for example, if a witch wants to put a curse on you, they might find that a lot easier if they know your true name, what you were called as a child. Whereas if you sort of stick to your nickname, then that might be a bit harder for them. So here we have there is a table of example names in the book, and here we have a random name generator on the right. If you're the kind of player who needs a bit of spark to get going, so hopefully clicking that will.
Boulder. Oh, okay. I like. At least I think I'm pronouncing it right. Boulder.
Yeah.
Right,
so each of the sort of different classes have different little name tables. So, for example, the landed sort of prestigious folks, they get second names. Whereas, sort of, if you're born out in the Weald, then you'll have sort of a much more guttural name.
Okay. All right, and I see the trade and path. Do I click those or?
So you'll have gained those sort of automatically. Those have been added to your character sheet. If you were playing with the book, you would write down Slumcast as a trait, and essentially your path that you're moving on to is the slums.
Okay.
So
all right.
Slumcast means that it's sort of a social trait. Traits are just the word, and you describe how you think they will help you. Some of them are really obvious, like I'm burly, that's going to help me lift heavy things. Whereas this sort of first one you get is it's essentially the class of person that you are. So Slumcast people are going to find it easier to convince other Slumcast people to sort of see their way of their point of view. You can talk to others a bit easier, whereas maybe the nobility is going to be a bit suspicious of you because you're poor and they're classist. So essentially, that's what that means. It's essentially telling you where you grew up. So if you hit continue, we will see how the slums treated you.
So I see an image, and below that, pick a trait. It looks like I could choose one or the other.
Yeah. So essentially, you can choose to be either swift-footed or quick-fingered. Growing up in the slums has taught you speed, if nothing else. Then. So swift-footed would be quick on your feet, able to get away from situations easier. Quick-fingered might help you out with picking locks or pockets or generally larcenous activities.
Well, going by my own personal experience, being swift-footed tends to save your life more times than I can count. So I would pick that.
There is a dedicated retreat check in the game, so.
Tell us what you remember of you. That's when I click the die. It will let me know what I remember.
Yeah. So this is essentially rolling on a table. So in the book, you see the full table and you roll a die and obviously take a look at entry number 4 in this case. And this is essentially just showing you entry number 4 without showing you any of the other stuff.
Oh, okay. And it looks like I chose a confined darkness. Rat Catchers Guild made good use of your small frame. They sent you into dark places as soon your forearms were covered in the scratches and bites of vermin. You may become a rat catcher or choose between the following. Gain either the fear of small spaces trait or the fear of the dark trait. Oh, that's a tough one. I'll choose rat catcher. The path.
Okay, so becoming a rat catcher.
No matter how many rats you destroy, more will always follow. Okay, it looks like I could pick on another trait.
Yeah, so either quick-fingered, and so if you had picked quick-fingered on the last thing, then you would basically get 2 XP rather than quick-fingered, so you can't get the same trait twice, essentially.
Okay.
But you do get some XP, which is used to basically during game to gain new abilities and traits and things.
Okay. Let me try Beastwise. This seems interesting. Tell us, what dark spaces did you crawl into? Let me click the die. Get 3. A smuggler's tunnel. There is little difference between an outlaw and a rat. You might either become an executioner, a reeve, or gain the compassionate trait. Oh gosh, that's such two different very different.
So essentially, you've got a couple of optional paths here, where you can either basically turn them in and follow the path of law with executioner and reeve. So reeve is an old-timey word. Sheriff is sort of where that word comes from. It's sort of an old lawman. Or you could, not turn them in, care for your fellow man, and gain the compassionate trait. And essentially, at the end of each of these paths, there are some sort of standard path options that you can choose from. So you're never sort of going to hit a dead end.
Oh, this is tough. I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try executioner. I'm curious about that. So I'm gonna select that.
Killing rats to killing men.
Executioner, the weighty axe and the biting blade that cheers up the crowd. Some memories never leave you. I pick another trait. Let's see. Meticulous or burly? I'll pick burly. Tell us, who was your last victim? You don't remember. It was Madonna's work, to say the least. Gained the finishing strike ability and the ruthless trait. Join the guild either to fill your pockets or sate your wrath. I have to say that the choices that I've been picking are original and they make me laugh. It's not something like oh, it's like a typical thing.
You've definitely created a bit of a cur.
Yeah, it's almost like this itself could be a game. Almost, this is a lot of fun to do.
So here, essentially, every character creation ends with why you joined the guild. So here you're sort of given the choice of, did you join the guild because they were going to pay you a lot of money to fill your pockets? You have some sort of skill, or generally, if your life's gone, like if you've picked up useful skills, the guild are more likely to actually pay you for your services. Or to sate your wrath. Guilds are often places where people are allowed to be more violent than they might be in other walks of life. I don't know why you stopped being an executioner, but perhaps you just couldn't, you couldn't go back to a normal life after that, so you decided to join the guild.
Let me choose fill your pockets. Maybe that's why I don't remember, because everything's just money to me in the end.
There's a I can't remember. I was talking to my brother-in-law who's Australian, and apparently over there is a law that you're not allowed to work in an abattoir for more than 6 months, basically straight, because apparently like just working with animals for that long, like killing them day in and day out, does basically breed serial killers and people who stop having empathy. So maybe it was good that you got out when you did.
Let's see. The guild offered you an opportunity which you were not going to squander. Tell us, what do you want to gain? Let's see.
So
That's
this often, so this last thing basically gives you a goal, which is a little side motivation for your character. Obviously, the main thing is going to be you want to help the guild and do your stuff as a party. It's definitely a very sort of objective-based game, but as a little side thing to give your character a bit more sort of depth and focus, you create a goal. So here we have, heresy. Oh dear.
Interesting. Yeah. Maybe I'm trying to find some sort of spirituality of doing all this, I guess, darkness. Okay, I picked the path, join the guild, and I select it. You stood at the threshold of the guild, throwing the rest of your life away to the vagaries of.
I think. But it is definitely a word I've seen written more than said.
Whether you felt relief or fear when they accepted you, we do not know. Pick a defining trait.
Yeah, so essentially, you've gained a load of traits during your character creation. Here they are listed out. And you pick one to be your defining trait. So in rules terms, essentially, if you are using a defining trait in a check and it's perfect for that check, you get an extra +1. And since it's a sort of D6 system, +1 is actually quite a lot. So essentially, you could be extremely swift-footed, or extremely good with animals, or extremely burly, or very good at connecting with other Slumcast folks. That sort of thing. So you sort of choose something that's uniquely you.
Okay. I'll pick swift-footed. A quick runner. Very excellent. All right. Should I view the character sheet with that?
Yeah, go for it. So this is your sort of, on your right, you've got a bit of the history, the choices that you made. And then on your left, you've got the stats sort of done as a, here they are. Here's all the stats you created. If you click save to PDF, it will actually sort of spit it out as a proper PDF. So essentially, you could basically copy this down onto a real character sheet if you prefer sort of the physical thing. Or if you click on that, hopefully it will create a PDF. Have it all filled out.
Generate PDF. Oh, excellent.
See all your private files at the same time.
Yeah. All right. And let me just quickly. All right. Look. Wow. Okay. Toughness of footing is listed. And you can see all
this is the digital version of the character sheet. It's all form fillable. Has all the stuff that you started with. You have an average coin purse because you joined the guild for money, so they gave you some money. You've got you got your player name. You've got a load of reminders of various sort of rules. So this is the sort of combats at the top, your actions that you can take in combat, and how the sort of standard attack check works. You've got your equipment. You've got a reminder of how the sort of standard dice check goes on the other page. And so it's sort of, because there's not a huge amount of sort of elements you need to track about your character. There's sort of 2 combat stats. There's your toughness and your footing. And then there's your traits and any abilities you might have picked up. So you picked up an ability, didn't you? Finishing strike.
I just want to let viewers know also that if for some reason you want to do this the old school way for any reason, there's also there's blank PDFs where you can fill out your information yourself. You can print them out. Or there's also, if you want to go in between that, there's also blank fillable PDFs available, as well as a bunch of other materials you can download for free for Doomsong. Yeah, this is great. That
Yeah,
was a lot of fun. How does like combat and skill checks work? And do you use only D6s for the
so
team?
it's 90% D6s and the Doom coin. So the Doom coin is a two-sided coin with crest on one side and skull on the other. And the way a normal check works is you roll a d6, the GM has set a difficulty, and essentially you add traits and gear. If something's useful, it gives you a +1 to your roll. If something's perfect, it gives you a +2. And if something's perfect and also it's your defining trait, then you get an extra +1 for a +3. Essentially, you add these traits and this gear and any conditions. So if you've got if you're bleeding out or you're currently angry and frustrated or any of these things, those can sort of add a minus to your check. You roll your die and you'll get one of 3 results. You'll get under the difficulty, equal to the difficulty, or over the difficulty. Over the difficulty is success, equal is success with some mitigating cost, some sort of extra thing that happens, and failing under the difficulty is a failure with cost. You don't have to just stick with that though. We have the Doom coin. So after almost any roll, you can say, I'm not happy with that. I want to flip the Doom coin. You flip the Doom coin, and if you get a crest, then your result goes up 1 step on that table. So if you've got an equal success with cost, then that's going to go up to just success and ignore the cost. And if you get a skull, it goes down 1. Where this gets most interesting is at the top and bottom of the table, we have critical success and critical failure. So the only way to get a critical is to get a success and then gamble it for that critical, and to say, oh, actually, I want to push harder and I want to really get the top results of amazing awesomeness. And it so the reasoning behind that system is, in a horror game, we find that you are really wanting to push the GM to be more lethal through the mechanics. And you're also, it's really useful to have a mechanic that makes it the player's fault they died, not the GM's. And because after you roll a failure, quite often, because if you flip that coin, you've got half a chance of turning that into success with cost. That could be a really big thing for you. But a critical failure is sort of, the GM has to have already gone, oh, this is what failure is. Now I've got to decide what's the step worse than that, which is often death, dismemberment, the really grim stuff. And so that's about 90% of the system, is this core sort of mechanic. In the back of the book, we've got loads of effect tables as examples. So you can sort of use the same system, but we sort of tailor that effect table to, so rather than success with cost, we're tailoring it to climbing or to trying to sneak past someone. And sort of that almost works as a lot of GM advice for sort of how to apply the effect tables and a worked example thing. And then when you get into combat, as is often the case, we sort of we get a bit more nitty gritty and a bit more, oh, actually, it's important sort of exactly what the details are here, because this is where people are more likely to die, and those +1s and +2s matter a bit more than they did when it was sort of convincing your way past the guard or something. So in combat, there is a really unique initiative system where essentially you take D6s and there are 6 steps that you can activate during a round. So during step 1, you might be drawing weapons, aiding your allies. During step 3, you might be doing a hasty attack, a sort of light, quick attack. During step 5, you're doing a big, heavy attack. So you decide where you want to act in the turn. And then monsters all have their own unique stats, their own unique actions they take during combat. So a good chunk of this book is those monsters and is their sort of unique action tables, which really makes them a sort of unique thing to fight, because you can't just go, oh, they'll act like this and they'll probably attack like this. You've got 6 unique things that they do, and sort of learning their rhythm is quite an important sort of thing in learning how to fight them. But you choose your actions, and then you simply go through. Does anyone have any ones? Everyone does their one actions. Anyone twos, threes, fours, five, sixes. And then a kind of quite interesting thing is that at the end of each round of combat, there's the retreat phase where everyone is asked, actually, do you want to scupper? Do you want to run away? Which is a way of getting around the no one wants to be the first person to run trope. I'm sure you've been in that in other RPGs where it's like, because there's sort of the trouble of a turn-based system is literally the first person to go, we should get out of here, is the one that's chosen to do that. But actually they want to hold the fort whilst the other people run, but they don't want to be the first people. So there's a little bit of that. And it also sort of abstracts that system. So retreating is a check. And if you succeed, then you got away somehow. And that might be immediately followed by a chase scene, or it might be immediately followed by hiding from your foes. But it is just you got away. And sort of, it's a really, so the reason it's there is a way of preserving the horror, and the option of run is always something that is available to you, almost always. And just getting that, like, it's always an option. It's always asked at the end of every round, like, do you guys want to run away? It's also asked of the monsters, but they're less commonly afraid of you. It's that gamble of, actually, I think we can survive one more round. Actually, I think this guy's on his last ropes. I think I've worked out how to beat him. Or I'm out. I'm running. You guys are on your own.
You sort of answered some of this already with talk about monsters, but my next question was about the monsters you have in this book. What can you tell us about them? And I know you mentioned some of the mechanical things about these creatures when the game master is role playing them. What else is there? Is there anything else besides that, I should say?
So there's essentially a load of creatures in the core book, and then a load of sort of specific creatures to the Plaguescape in Lord Have Mercy Upon Us. And something that's a real sort of theme with them is Old English folklore twisted through imagination and warping and what we thought was cool at the time into, like, we're really happy with the sort of the strong mythological elements that are in there that are often quite almost a puzzle, like, in the same way that sort of in a more like pop culture example is, if you're facing a vampire, like, but you didn't know what the weaknesses of a vampire was, then it would be you can stab and shoot and do whatever, and they seem to not care whatsoever. But if you throw them into daylight and stab their heart with a stake, then you've hit their weaknesses. And so, like, we wanted to recapture that sort of horror vibe of. There was a wonderful tweet of about Dracula, of, like, part of the comedy of reading Dracula as a modern, like, person is that Dracula is so embedded in our pop culture that you're just reading it and going, yeah, he's a Dracula. Like, he's doing all this spooky, I do not drink wine. And you're like, yeah, because you drink blood, you're a Dracula. And so essentially, I think there's a lot of stuff that's ingrained in our pop culture that we break some of the ties of that and sort of mix it up with our own sort of mythology, which we've tried to make as sort of digestible and logic isn't the right word, but its own internal logic that it follows. Is essentially sort of the dreads and the allure morns, these sort of two battling vibes of traitor god. Neither of them good, but bad in different ways. And so there's a lot of that, like, weird mythology, and also, so one of the first, like, notes that we make in the book is that balance is dead. Balance is not a thing in this game. There's no sort of CRs or, when you're this strong, you should be facing this. Something you might have got from that character creation is that you can start with almost nothing, and you can or you could start as a pretty badass warrior who's going to not really get much better because they're already basically there. Being a good warrior is pretty much just having a trait that's really applicable to fighting. So the brawling trait, or the brawler trait, or the marksman trait, or something like that. And you're kind of there, because when we're sort of talking about the levels of monster that we're facing, there isn't a huge amount of difference between the dude who's really good at fighting and the guy who isn't. There is a fair amount. That +2 is a big bonus on a d6. But the interesting sort of stuff comes from a lot of the ways you apply common sense knowledge and stuff you've picked up. You learn that these monsters are afraid of fire, or can't pass through keyholes, or things like that. And that sort of thing is something that we're really, I think the best thing about a fight is often working out the weakness. I think that element is something that we really, really enjoy putting into monsters. There's a lot of monsters who are they can't be stabbed. They have this way or this thing that just means that straight up attacking them, because that's everyone's first thing, isn't going to work, or is going to be less effective, or is going to be there's better ways of dealing with them.
I like that. I like that that it's not your typical hack and slash. You're kind of, the scenario forces players to really think about what they're facing and think more strategically, instead of just oh, it's gonna hit it with an axe and it'll go down, or something like that. Was that kind of your intention? You were hoping to create something more creative in the role-playing atmosphere?
Yeah, so it's that, and it's also more impactful in a round. So when running the game, few combats last more than 2 or 3 rounds. Some do sort of last a bit longer, but the way that sort of combat works and attacking someone works is essentially you attack someone and they have the option of spending footing, which is essentially their sort of defense stat to block or parry the attack, which means that the next guy who attacks you, where you either had the chance of spending loads of footing on this first attack and being pretty much safe, and now you're completely open to this second attack. And this sort of system means that people go down real quick, and things can turn on a dime. And you have these sort of combats that can go south really badly, or a couple of lucky rolls, and you've got the werewolf pinned, and you are have the upper hand. And I think that sort of capriciousness almost, or that mixed with a rewarding of sort of in-player knowledge, and actually it was a good idea to have someone up on the ridge, is a really rewarding thing. There's an interesting thing, I think I remember it from Matt Colville video, where he's talking about combat as sport versus combat as warfare. Whereas sort of a lot of your traditional D&Ds, or modern day D&Ds, I should say, are very much about that combat sport. You generally expect people to be facing the enemy in this sort of particular way, and it's kind of bad form to try and think too far out of the box, because that breaks the game. And combat as warfare can be really rewarding when it's done right. And you are said, no, there's 20 wolves here, and you can't fight 20 wolves. What are you going to do about it? We're not working out the sort of best challenge, or the way in which this should work. We are finding out how this does work. You are sometimes in a position of sort of tactical superiority, and sometimes you're not, and it's your job to try and make sure that first one is the case as often as possible. So we're definitely coming at it from that point of view, which is something that sort of the OSR community and things like that really espouse, and really like that vibe.
Let's talk about the art style for this. Is this, from what I've seen so far, is this all black and white? What was your direction exactly with this book?
Yeah, so most of the art was created by a German guy called Moritz Krebs, who does these amazing black crab art, who does these amazing illustrations of this very sort of Gormenghast, horrible world that's going poorly. But then with sort of Chris and doing the graphic design and more illustration, there are splashes of color in here. The most eye-catching page is probably the gods page, which is here.
Oh, that's pretty.
Yeah, so the idea behind color in the book is that it only appears in the book where magic is. So black and white is the world, and then wherever the gods' sort of heresy touches things, there's magic, which gives us this neat little way of sort of just putting a bit of color, a bit of splash of color in various sort of pieces of artwork, which I think really makes them pop in a way that is very exciting. I know that graphic designers around the world are saying, "Oh, he just said pop. I hate it." But just that little use of color, and then sort of that almost allows you to use it as a tool as well, because once you've sort of learned that rule, whether it's because you've seen it or heard of an interview or whatever, or you've just learned it through, you feel it in your bones, then you get to a page that has color and you go, something's going on. Like there's heresy here. This is this is a page that I should be paying attention to because there's something mystical happening here. But yeah, we've been really happy to work with Moritz Krebs. He's done some absolutely amazing stuff for us, and there's a lot of his artwork going into Thou Shalt Not Suffer the Witch as well.
Oh, interesting. I love that you use color that's for specifically anything that magic touches, which gives magic in your setting, I assume, like a really extra feel, like a sense of really wonder and fantastic happening right around you, especially even in a world where it seems like the world's ending, and there's no hope out there. But the magic of the world seems to give it something a little bit special, even if it's not for the best. It might be evil magic, but it's still colorful in its own way. So this is a 300-page book. Am I correct?
Yeah, the core book is 304 pages, I think, and then the Lord Have Mercy is about 350. Which is the campaign book. So they're pretty hefty tomes.
Well, for the core book itself, do you mind going over quickly like the chapters that are in there and what it covers?
Yeah, exactly? Of course. So the first section is guilds and characters. So that's a little bit of what we saw earlier in creating your character. And that's a fairly hefty section, that character creation section. There's over 70 different paths, and of course you're doing a mix of those paths, so there's an infinite amount of permutations. Then we have the core rules, which, as you can imagine, is how to play the game, how gear works, how weapons work, how combat works, all of that stuff, along with some of the special checks. So special checks are essentially, they use the same sort of system that I was talking about earlier with checks, but the outcome is sort of by a predetermined table that sort of has a bit more of a rulesy element to it than the sort of more fluffy success with cost element that the sort of standard check uses. Then we have a section on heresy and sort of the gods of the world. And this is where we go into essentially the mythology of the world. As I was saying with magic, the only magic in the world is from the gods. There is no sort of natural magic or other types of, like, there's no arcane magic, for example. And so it is all sort of a transactional nature where you sign a bit of your soul away to the gods and they give you power for that. Then we have the history of Paynim, which is, I think, around 10 pages, so we've kept that fairly sort of short. There's quite a fun bit in that I like, which is, so all events in Paynim, we say that the time that your game starts is the year 451, and that is the only date we'll ever put in the book. Like, anything else either happened recently, half a lifetime ago, or in the distant past. Like, those are the sort of 3 times when things can have happened. Because and while we think dates and sort of specific timekeeping can be really important, that's why there's actually a calendar of the year in the book, for sort of keeping a track of your adventures, and it's filled with like festivals and what's happening in the year, and sort of world building information that can be sort of passed out chronologically. But it's not important to keep track of exactly the dates in the past, like before your adventure began. So we keep that sort of quite open to interpretation. Then a huge section of the book is the allies and adversaries, which is essentially your monsters, the bestiary, and that goes through creatures sort of quite natural, like the dire pike, the Boughton lobe, which is a giant sentient bear, the Fennig, which are probably the closest we get to like goblins. They're sort of hedgehog folk that steal everything that's not nailed down, as well as going up to mannequin, which are sort of golem-esque creatures created by one of the traitor gods, Toil. We even have one of the traitor gods in here, Hope, who is a gigantic stag who can grant wishes that definitely don't have any downside whatsoever. So that is Hope.
Wow, that's gorgeous.
Who, yeah, sort of, it's another fun thing that we can do with this world is because it's the biblical apocalypse, because things are going to hell in a handbasket. The first book rips apart part of the world. The second book rips apart another part of the world. And by our sort of stated 4-book series that we like, ideally, if we get funding and everything goes well, we want to sort of do these four horsemen books. We can have ripped this world apart, and there's almost nothing, like, you can tell stories in between those things, but the world has ended. It is the apocalypse. Because I think there's this want when you're doing when you're creating a world is it can feel quite static. You go, oh, 1,000 years ago the elves were doing this, and 100 years later, and nah. Like 1,000 years ago the gods created man, and now they're all going to die. So yeah, you have a huge section on allies and adversaries. We have a small section on flora, so plants and stuff that you can find in the world, and then a full. This is the bit that is most exciting, of course. Is a full index of everything throughout this book. I think something that maybe doesn't sound very exciting, but I find very exciting, is I cannot overstate the amount of cross-referencing and page numbers in this book and in Lord Have Mercy Upon Us. Almost whenever something is mentioned that has a physical, like a reason to go off the page, we try and make sure that it is referenced, or it is something that is really easy to pick up what we're talking about, and whether it's sort of rules based, and whether it's something you should be going off and sort of, oh yeah, I can go to this section, and oh yeah, it's this monster that they're talking about. And yeah, it's a really fine line between sort of overdoing that and creating something that is really usable. And we're really proud of where we ended up with that.
Wow. If I may ask, there's so much. You have so much information there. Do you have, well, maybe asking you what's your favorite, like either setting piece or PC you made might be a little bit too tough because it's just so much. I'm sure that you've seen and played so much. So what I would like to ask instead is there maybe a memory, something that you look back on, whether you're playtesting this with other people, or maybe this something you're very most proud of when it comes to your setting, or is there anything that really stands out to you since the making of this book?
So I have one that immediately jumped to mind, but it is also kind of, twist is a strong word, but it's a big sort of plot point in Lord Have Mercy Upon Us. So I sort of want to avoid that. I think that it's in a really early sort of playtest. I used to run this basically every Monday night. I would run something that I called the Bear Pit, which was essentially a bit of a fight scene. There wouldn't be much in the way of the sort of plot and the lore of the world. It would just be, hey, you guys make some characters real quick, and we're going to throw down some beasties and stuff. And there was this one where one of the players, it came up in their backstory that they were rolling, was that essentially they had killed a Boughton Lobe, a giant sentient bear, and were sort of being chased, hunted by it throughout sort of their life. And so sort of by coincidence, the creature that I just picked up for this random, like, oh, this isn't a story like game, this is just trying out the mechanics to make sure that, we're not creating a system that isn't wildly broken. It's just vicious. So we ended up playing this game that was sort of supposed to be without context, but sort of through that random creation, it sort of gained this context, and suddenly it was their Boughton Lobe that had been chasing them throughout their whole life. And they sort of ran this scene. They went through all this terror, because this thing it has this special move where it will grab someone, it will pin them to the ground, and then it will ready a die. So it's like a held action. It will ready a die to basically slowly torture that person if you don't do what they say. They're horrible creatures, the Boughton Lobe. And so sort of through this thing, they'd created this very sort of memorable story-like moment in something that I was sort of physically trying to avoid. I was like, we're just placing some nameless guys to fight a bear, and it's just going to be this. And like suddenly it's like, no, he was my brother, don't torture him, you've taken so much from me already. And it's kind of that. I think our design is often focused on sort of 1,000 straws to break the role-playing camel's back. Like, we'll put in like all these little things that sort of link to the world and link to the backstory and link to everything else in the world, so that sort of something will catch in anyone's game. Like, we try and make things as quick and accessible as possible, and then sort of intercede all these little elements. So you end up with all these little cogs that might intermesh and create these moments that, even if you're not aiming for them, they happen. So you sort of fight against that. Oh, I've decided everything already as GM, and I've created this sort of perfectly crafted world. You end up with a lot more like grit in there, which makes for interesting motion. So I think in fighting the Boughton Lobe and finding a story in there was definitely a really, really nice moment in the early. It was in really early playtesting as well, and it was like a moment that was quite gratifying. It's like, oh yeah, I think we've got something here. I think this this has legs.
Mm. So again, Doomsong, it's available through Modifius. It's available through Drive to RPG. It's available through your website, and you can get both the PDF and physical copies. Plus, I'm assuming you must have a Doom coin available for purchase, as well as maps and things like that.
So we've got the main book that we've been talking about. We've got Lord Have Mercy Upon Us, which has some fun little extra bits. I always love showing this off. This is the Lice Mother and Father Plague, who are too big to sort of fit on on a one-page spread. This is our commitment to always having a 2-page spread. We do have to cheat sometimes and create a gigantic. That's essentially the final boss of the Plaguescape. It's been ruining your life. So that is Lord Have Mercy Upon Us. Then we have really fun product that is the Calendar of Paynim. So essentially, a lot of this content is in the main book, but this is presented in a sort of notebook style, going through a year of Paynim. So as a GM, you can essentially go, oh, their leg's going to heal in D6 days. I'll write that down D6 days later. It's filled with like festivals and really cool world building stuff. There's a weather table at the top of each week, so you can sort of randomly generate the weather each day. Really fun little product there. Then we have the map of the Plaguescape, which I'm holding upside down. The map of the Plaguescape,
Wow.
which is a full cloth map for planning your adventures. So essentially, each of these locations is in the campaign as a sort of full 2-page spread location. We have a wonderful Doom coin. Each of these has been personally cursed by a graphic designer. And sort of then there's a couple of other things. There's the GM reference cards, which are these foil-backed cards that sort of have a lot of the like stuff to reference, like quick play information. Then we have the Father Plague miniature. We have a small mini of Father Plague that works as a holder for the Doom coin, so you can like guard your Doom coin whilst the players are not holding it, and to contain its evil.
So what's next for you, and what's next for Doomsong?
So next up is Thou Shalt Not Suffer the Witch. This is a full-sized adventure, like Lord Have Mercy Upon Us, that will be compatible with the core book, with Doomsong, that will put you in the shoes of witchfinders who are going around the region of Cocytus, trying to basically hunt down witches. So Cocytus is the breadbasket of Panem. Panem's the world. Cocytus is essentially a kingdom within that world that provides a lot of food for the other kingdoms. It's a very sort of prosperous region. But oh no, there's a famine. And people are immediately getting desperate. What used to be sort of these bustling communities are suddenly like falling apart and out of each other. Sort of the farmers are trying to get to the cities as like a last-ditch attempt to sort of make a living, which are sort of just exacerbating the problem of people to feed, and things are really like going downhill quickly. The adventure itself is split into essentially 7 mini adventures that sort of link together. These like which essentially work as murder mysteries. So you are playing as witchfinders. You'll go to a region and you'll learn sort of what famine is, like what specific famine is plaguing that region, or sort of what effect and the reason that they think is heresy is causing it. And it's kind of your job to root it out, find the witch. It's a really interesting way of running a game. So in our private games, we've been running sort of Witchfinder adventures for quite a long time now, a few years. And it's such a different dynamic to make the players a part of the world, but also an authority within the world. Like they are in charge. They go to a village and they are the people in charge. It's not somewhat that they answer to. And you get a lot of some players, like it immediately goes to their heads and you go, oh yeah, in real life, let's not give you power. But it also just, it puts this very like interesting spin on the choices you make and the morality, because you are put in charge. And it's not as black and white as these people are just trying to feed themselves and help each other. There is evil. There is definitely, the traitor gods are not good. And you are playing characters that generally, most likely, believe that, although some of you may be witches, so may have your own opinions on what you do to avoid being burnt at the stake. And essentially, you sort of mix that with this murder mystery, sort of very much about collecting clues, finding out who's the witch, why they've done sort of what they've done. And then it all culminates with the witch trial, which is a scene that essentially works like Poirot around the fireplace, where you present your evidence for why they're a witch and what they've done. And there's sort of a few different categories for your evidence. It's like how they could have done what they did, like why they might have done what they did, and also why they don't worship the divine corpse enough. Is another sort of form of evidence you can give. Is they're not devout enough, and essentially all of that sort of mechanic culminates in your judgment, and there is never any restrictions on your judgment. You can say guilty or innocent, whatever you like. You can procure, you can say whatever, and the check is how everyone reacts to that. So you could just rock up to town, point at the first person, and say, "I don't like the cut of your jib. You're a witch." Burn them at the stake, and the townspeople are going to riot. They're going to, maybe in your first adventure you can do that. You can get away with that, and everyone will be like, "Hey, the witch is dead." But the second town will have heard of what happened to the first town, and so unless you can sort of build this legitimacy throughout your adventure, the sort of populace turns against you as they're all getting desperate and maybe feeding these witch finders who are just coming into their town to like find a local, someone you've known all of your life, and then rip them from their home. Like, you're definitely not the good guys. I'm not sure who is, but it's this dilemma sort of undercurrent running through the whole game. I will jump in and say that in our world, we definitely jump on the witch trial nature of witch trials, and there's there's a lot of terrible things that were done during this time that we use as inspiration. Something that we do completely sort of step back from and say that's not our game, that's not what we're doing, is the misogynistic aspect that was a huge part of the witch trials, and can't be understated how like horribly misogynistically motivated those trials were. And so that is something, like, in our world, witches can be male or female, and we generally try and avoid sort of that aspect of the thing, because whilst it's a very sort of core thing in our world, it doesn't have to be in the world of Painian. So you play as witchfinders, you're trying to find witches, and throughout the day, you might find that the real witch was the friends you made along the way.
Well, awesome. Before we wrap up our interview, is there anything else you want to say about this project? Anything that I haven't asked you about?
Oh, yeah, I should probably say, if you are interested in learning more about witches and Thou Shalt Not Suffer a Witch, you can jump onto our Kickstarter and click the notify me when this launches button. That's super great for us and super good for you, because you'll be told when we launch, which should in theory be sometime late summer, June, July. The other thing you can do, if you want sort of more, that'll just give you a like, oh, we're launching now, come and take a look, which might be what you're looking for. But if you're looking for something more involved and you just want to learn more about Doomsong and what we're doing over here at Caeser Inc., then you can join our Discord. You can find our newsletter. We send out a lot of information on there. And you can follow us on Blue Sky as well. We do a lot of just thought splurging out there.
Well, excellent. Well, Jack, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about Doomsong. I will put a link to a couple of links to everything you said in the description below. Everyone, thank you for watching or listening. Stay safe out there. We'll see you next time.